Welcome to Make It Plain from Make Plain Jesus Ministries, featuring Pastor James Bryan, where we take biblical truths in everyday situations and break them down to be as plain as possible. So, stay tuned and enjoy the broadcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Make It Plain. I am so excited to be able to spend time with you. And of course, I'm Pastor James Bryan. Just call me James. And that's fine. But I want to just spend some time with you, just sharing some little nuggets of truth, some biblical truths that apply to life in general and to everything that you encounter during the course of a day. I hope that you've been blessed by all the other podcasts that have come before this, and hopefully those that come afterwards. But we are striving to make sure that we are able to touch on topics that will help you live life even better. And before I even go further, I just want to offer this out to you, which, sometimes we do this and I often forget to, so I'll do it now. And that is, if there are certain topics that you really need some answers to, just send us a note, contact us, and let us know so that we can make sure that we address these in one of the upcoming podcasts. Just go to our website at makeplainjesus.org, makeplainjesus.org. And we will gladly begin to address those topics or give you some food for thought. How's that? I think that would be a good way to help you in just living life and getting more of God in you. Okay? Now, today, though, I want to talk about a topic that we all have to deal with this at some point. Some people on a regular basis, some people every once in a while, but there comes to this point where you have to make a decision. And we're calling this podcast Crossing the Line. Crossing the line. And so in this one, it's one of those things that we all have to address. Now, first of all, you kind of have to have some understanding of where you stand, where that line is. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I should stop and just talk about that line first, right? And then we can go from there. How's that? Well, the line, as I call it, is a point where you won't go over. You remember kids, maybe at the beach, they would draw a line in the sand and they would have all kinds of games about not crossing the line, or maybe if they're aggressive, they'll be wrestling back and forth and we need to push you over the line. It's always a point of making sure that that's your end of your territory or the boundary of which you can go. And so it's the same thing in your everyday life, right? You have a boundary of things that you feel comfortable with, that you don't want to step outside of that boundary. And from a Christian perspective, there are certain things that you don't feel comfortable doing that are beyond a certain boundary. You kind of have a certain, whether you realize it or not, you have a certain segment or a boundary which you're comfortable operating in, but anything outside of that, not necessarily. I'll give you some easy ones first. And those easy ones might be, I'm good being behind the scenes, helping people and everything else. But if you put me in front of a camera, or you put me in front of lights or in front of people just for a minute, I will freeze up. That's outside of my boundaries. I don't feel comfortable there. And that may be some of you, right? That may be how some of you feel. And so that's outside of that boundary. Or if you are one that is a great cook or a chef, there are certain things you feel very comfortable making. And you can just whip that up real quick, whatever's in that inside the boundary. But once someone asks you to do something you've never done before, many people will say, oh, I don't know about that because I've never done it. I don't feel comfortable doing those things. I've never tried, and you begin to fill in the blank. So that's outside of your boundary. And so many people have a line that designates that boundary. They don't want to go over that. Well, when you have professed that you are a Christ follower, as I like to call those who are saved and follow Jesus, that there are certain things that you don't feel comfortable doing. It may be some things that you used to do all the time, but now that you found Jesus, you realize that maybe those things aren't beneficial to me, or they aren't pleasing to him. So thinking about that for a minute, my question is, what happens if you are in the workplace and you are asked to cross the line that you have, and you aren't feeling comfortable with that? What are you going to do? What happens with that? Think about it. Some of you have dealt with that, I'm sure. Some of you are dealing with that right now. They're asking me to do these things and I don't really feel comfortable. They're asking me to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit, but I don't feel comfortable. They're asking me to blatantly misrepresent something to a client, but I don't feel comfortable. What do you do in those cases? They're asking me to do all these things. They're paying me well or they're compensating me well, but I don't feel comfortable with the way that business is done. And so that's something that from a Christian perspective that people sometimes have to deal with. I would say frequently have to deal with. And the question becomes, how do you react to it? And so you got to think about a number of things. When you come into those situations, you really have to look at how it's done and what is being done. There's certain things that will rise to a large occasion that could even impact if it comes back to you from a financial perspective, from a legal perspective, and you have to weigh those things. Some things may be that, they're off by a penny in their calculations, and that may not make a difference. So it's not something that has to be addressed right away. But when you have things that are blatantly across the line, you've got to really think about, well, what is my reaction? If it's the normal process of doing certain things and that they've never been caught before, but that's part of the practice, you have to say, as a Christian, do I feel comfortable being a part of this? And so you may be able to rectify the situation by just offering an alternative method to still get things done, by getting it done such that it's legally correct, such that it's morally correct. And you begin to try to work it that way. And so that may mean that you have to change some processes, but you think it through and offer solutions as opposed to just saying, I don't feel comfortable with this. You offer a solution. Now, if the solution or the solutions you may offer are not received at all, then you have to think about, well, what do you do next? And when you go through this analysis, because you're being asked to really step beyond the line that is a line from a Christian perspective that you shouldn't cross, you look at, well, what was my agreement when I signed up for this role? Was that something that was already there? Was that something that I should have known? And then you have to decide. If the answer is yes, you have to decide, well, do I just go ahead and just close my eyes and ignore it? Or do I do something different, which means that maybe I have to look for a different position in order to keep myself in right standing? Hard decisions to make sometimes, right? Sometimes it is very hard to decide because, again, maybe the compensation is well, or maybe you like the folks that are around you, but this thing is so large that it really is having an impact on you. So you need to think about it. But even more so, when you go through all of this, you have to remember something, because what's written in the Bible is very interesting and easy to digest, right? There are parts of the scripture that kind of talks to how you relate and how you interact and the decisions that you would have to make. And so I look at this for a minute and I begin to think about, well, what would Jesus do? One of those things, and try to see how to go about addressing the problems that are in front of me. I do this on a regular basis. But I remember that in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 23, there is something that is written that I always have to come back to and really think about and compare it to whatever's facing me. And it says, and whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. Let me say that one again. In other words, whatever you're doing, no matter how big or small it is, think about it this way. You're doing it to the Lord and not to men. So would the Lord be okay with me crossing the line here? Would he be okay if he responded to me right that minute? And that's what we have to look at. And if we feel inside that, I don't know, and you begin to see biblically it's not correct, or you have trusted God-fearing people that come to you and it's like, no, that you shouldn't be doing that. That's a real challenge. Then you have to make a decision, because ultimately the decision is yours. Ultimately, it's your decision. And so what you're doing is trying to weigh what's being presented in front of you. You know, some of the people who had some of these Ponzi schemes in the past, I don't know if any of them were Christian or not, but if they were, but yet they still took part in that aspect, they may be receiving certain consequences because they crossed the line, because maybe they like mammon more than God. Maybe they like money more than God. And so you have to think about it from that perspective. That's also the issue that happens when people rise so much in fame and they begin to love the fame so much, whether it's in church or outside of church, that they really cross a line about what God is saying and doing. We all have to understand where our line is and what to do in those instances where maybe we have crossed it. So sometimes you may say, well, how do I know, or what do I do, or how do I deal with this? First of all, remember two things. Jesus told us that you can't serve two masters, right? He tells us in Luke 16:13, he says, no servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. We have to know where that line is and then decide, is it God that's more important, or is it the money that I can make? And oftentimes people fall for the money part because they think about what they can do with the money. And what I'm saying to you is really think that through, because in the end, money can disappear. So think about what is good and healthy for you from a God perspective. The other thing to think about, and this is a suggestion to you, this is what I've done oftentimes, even when I'm trying to decide on certain positions and whether those positions are really in line with God. I adhere to Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. I kind of look to that. And it says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. And so a lot of times I have to get quiet because I need to know what the next step is. I need to know, is this a godly step or not? I need to know whether I'm about to cross the line, because I don't want to cross the line and be outside of God's will. I would rather have him than, as an old song used to say, I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. Well, I would if I have to choose from that perspective. And that's what we have to think about. So if you're being asked to go over the line by your boss or co-workers, or you're being pressured, then you have to think about, well, what does that mean? But remember, I don't want you to get the idea that anything that you have an inkling that you think maybe possibly might be over the line, that you begin to say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. You have to really think about it first. What really is over the line? Or is it more that you're feeling uncomfortable because you've never done a task before that they're asking? And remember, if they hired you to do something and you agreed, then you have to decide, do I stay in that role or not? But you don't want to be the one that just says everything is wrong. Does that help? I want you to think about that for a minute. Even if you've never faced those situations, think about what would you do? How would you handle it? Would you bring an alternative solution that works for everybody? How would you address those things? As you approach that line and are about to cross it, how do you begin to show your light of Christ, but yet make sure that you are not compromising your situation? Jesus wants you to be successful in business. He wants you to be successful in your place of employment. He wants you to be successful in life. Just do it his way, and you'll find out that he can make everything work out for you. So remember, even if right now when you're listening to this, you're trying to deal with an uncomfortable situation, just remember, make all your requests known to him. Be anxious for nothing. And just know that the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, that's the confirmation of knowing that he's addressing it and he's giving you the direction and the answer. So hopefully this has been helpful to you from the standpoint of dealing with this aspect of life. If so, I'm asking you to go ahead and share it. I'm asking you also to just re-listen to it so that these nuggets can sink into you and help you to be successful through God's eyes in life. That's what matters the most. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to just be able to share with you in the next podcast.